There we go. I don't think it's very big. Well, take it back. A little scrapper. Whatever it is. Hang on a second here, guys. I'm wondering if this is a black carp. Hey guys, how are we doing? We are going to be fishing a little tributary creek that runs through this bottom ground. And where I'm going is a real sharp bend in this creek, and there's actually another little creek coming into it. We've had a little rain today, so I'm hoping the water coming out of that little tributary creek came up a little bit and got off color to feed this hole. It's been really dry for a while, so this creek is not very big at all. But I'm in the bend of a creek, and there's a pretty decent little hole of water right there, so it congregates the fish. So I'm hoping this little rain we had will get them up feeding. We're going to be throwing some night crawlers, some cut bait, and maybe even some like dip bait for catfish. So come along, let's see how we do. Alright guys, I am going to apologize in advance. Where I'm going, straight across from me, there's a railroad trestle, and they are doing some work on it. So there's going to be some noise and stuff, but it shouldn't affect the fishing, I'm hoping, because they've been working on this thing quite a while. So let's see how it goes. Alright guys, we're going to start out with some night crawlers. Let's see what happens. I'm hoping it's hanging a big old massive gar fest. Well, not too much water out there anymore. Alright, we'll cut us a piece of, got some shad, we'll cut it up. See what happens. See what happens, y'all. Nope, already getting a bite. Got him. We ain't been here just a few minutes. A little bitty channel cat, little bitty guy. For all I know, there may not be no big fish staying in this hole due to the drop so much. I didn't think it was this low. There we go, guys. Got him. What do we got? Feels like a little cat. Yep, little bullhead cat. A little yellow belly. Get him back. Good thing he didn't get on my worm. Oh, there we go, guys. Well, just got that summer rod down, got smoked. Look at that, little grass carp. Alright, let's get this guy back. Oh, took Got a hidden shot down in the mud. There he goes. Well, I'm trying to throw my bait. There's that little creek coming out. Pretty decent little current coming up there, trying to get it right where it comes in. And a lot of times in this case, whoop, hang on a second, guys, getting a bite here. Oh, missed him. But what I was getting ready to say, a lot of times in these cases, when you get a little creek coming into this like this, in time the high water, when it's running real hard, it'll blow out a hole, like a little scour hole right there. And usually, a lot of times, that'll be the deepest spot in the entire hole. Well, I just got my line clipped. Right there, the gar. Something sucking around the worm. There we go. Nope, little white bass. Definitely getting a variety, guys. Definitely getting a variety. Little white bass. So far we've gotten channel cap, bullhead, grass carp, not white bass. So nothing big yet. There we go. I don't think it's very fighting, but I don't think it's very big. Well, take it back. A little scrapper. Wherever it is. Oh no. Hang on a second here, guys. I'm wondering if this is a black carp. These things are supposedly like an invasive species and they want to remove, so it's definitely not a grass carp. And they're not supposed to put these things back if that's what this is. I'm gonna have to call the local conservation office and to see what this is. I'm pretty sure it's one of them invasive black carp. Just gonna chunk him up in the bank because they don't want you to release something because they're invasive. They eat a lot of the mussels, like the clams in the river. So in Missouri, making a heck of an effort trying to eliminate them. All right, guys, I just Googled it on my phone, and that's exactly what I did catch. Was an invasive black carp. The exact same thing on the picture. Let's read up on it real quick here. Okay. Native to Asia. Date of introduction 1970s. Means of introduction: first introduced as a contaminant in imported grass carp stocks, later introduced as a food fish and biological control agent. Impact: presumed to negatively impact native aquatic communities by feeding on and reducing population of native mussels and shells, many of which considered endangered or threatened. Well, that's cool. Got one out of there. Hey guys, a little bit of an update on that black carp I caught the other day. After I caught it, I contacted a fisheries biologist out of Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and sent him a picture of the fish as well. Well, he contacted me back this morning, because that was a Friday. This is Monday afternoon. And he said without 100% doubt, that was a black carp. So he wants to meet with me and take possession of the fish. I froze the fish after I caught it. And he wants us to take possession of it, to be sent off, to be studied and whatnot. And he's also agreed to sit down and do an interview with us to maybe educate us on the species of these black carp and possibly other invasive species here in the state of Missouri. So this ought to be a real interesting interview. So you guys come along and we'll go meet the gentleman. Hey guys, we're sitting here with Dave Canute, with wildlife fisheries biologist out of Cape Girardeau. He's going to give us a little info on these black carp and different invasive species. What can you tell us about these things?
Well, the black carp was first introduced in the 1970s, and it was actually accidentally introduced. And they come from China, so they're one of the 4 Asian carp: silver, the big head, the grass carp, and the black carp. So they're all native to Asia, but they were brought over in the 1970s accidentally as contaminated with some grass carp. Arkansas Game and Fish eradicated those. And then in the 1980s, they were actually brought over again for they're snail eaters when they're adults. So the aquaculture facilities brought these over to help them eradicate snails in their aquaculture ponds, because the snails serve as an intermediate part of the life cycle for parasitic trematode worm. So that's why they brought them over, to help to clean the snails out to help eradicate those trematode parasites.
Okay. We're like far as the range right now. How spread across the United States are they?
So we really started finding them in 2003 in the Mississippi River drainage, because they were actually brought over in southeastern states in those aquaculture facilities down there. So Mississippi River is more of the origin for these species. We have found them in the Missouri River and the Osage River, a few of those other major tributaries to the Missouri River, but right now I think they're fairly restricted to the Mississippi River drainage.
How common are they? Are they just starting to get a foothold?
They're getting more and more common. We're seeing commercial fishermen actually start to catch these incidentally when they're out fishing, so they definitely are becoming more prolific. The Fish and Wildlife Service added them to their injurious fish lists under the Lacey Act, so it's illegal to transport any live gametes or viable gametes, any eggs, any live black carp, because they are so destructive to some of our native fish species and mainly our native mussel species.
Okay. How large do these things get?
Most of the time they're around 3 or 4 feet, 33 pounds, but they can get up to 150 pounds. They live approximately, we think, about 15 years, so they are a fairly long-lived fish. They take about 4 to 5 years to reach sexual maturity, but I think they're fairly prolific, and have a lot of young, similar to the grass carp, the silver carp, or big head carp.
What is the long-term effects if these things get a foothold?
So the worst thing about the black carp is that they, like I said, early in life they feed on zooplankton. So all of our fish in the state at their early life stages are feeding on zooplankton. Some of our adult fish, like the paddlefish, the gizzard shad, strictly rely on zooplankton, so they can directly impact in that way. But their biggest threat is to our native mollusk, our native mussels. And that's because they have these teeth and they're adapted for crunching hard shells, so they will actually eat those juvenile mussels. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but 50% or greater than 50% of our native mussels in the state are either critically endangered, imperiled, or species of conservation.
Look at our water clarity and stuff.
Yeah, and mussels are a great indicator of water quality, because they can't move in their environment very far. So good water quality, you're going to have, and stable substrate, you're going to have, prolific mussel species, and they're the first step in filtering the water. So the water that you drink is initially filtered by mussels, which is fascinating to me. But yeah, so they play a critical role in a lot of things. But yeah, that would be the biggest impact. And like I said, our mussels have already taken a huge hit because of the impacts that we've had on the landscape, water pollution, landscape practices, you name it. They've already taken a hit. So now we got another challenge ahead of us with the black carp.
So if someone were to catch a black carp, what are the steps they should take?
So I gave you a handout, and you can give those numbers out, but the USGS and Southern Illinois University right now are doing a study on them to look at recruitment, growth, mortality, and they're also doing, they're taking the ear bones out of these fish, and they're doing something we call microchemistry, which you can actually based on, well, in simple terms, basically they take a laser and they can scan that ear bone, and each year on that ear bone, the fish lays down an annuli, similar to a tree ring.
Mm-hmm.
So a tree lays down a ring after one growing season. So they can go back and they look at two different chemicals with that laser, and they can actually trace the origin of that species. So where it actually came from, where it's moving. So that's what they're doing. So we're trying to figure out how fast these things are spreading and where they're coming from, and I think that's the main purpose of their study.
So, as far as like the Asian carp and the big head carp, how's your guys' war against them going?
So there is an Asian carp task force, and there are several processing plants in Kentucky and Illinois that are actually processing mainly silver bighead carp, but they will take grass carp. And black carp is relatively a new thing, so we're still kind of figuring out what to do with them. But that's the biggest thing with the Asian carp and the bighead carp for sure, is actually, trying to create a market for these things. We don't want to make it sustainable. That's the thing we stress, that we want to try to at least get down those numbers to a reasonable level where they're not having the impacts that we're seeing. So there's incentives in some states. Kentucky's doing incentives, especially in Barkley and Kentucky Lake, where they're actually paying commercial fishermen on a certain percentage on top of what they're getting from the processing plants. We're going to be doing something similar. I believe it's gone through where we're going to actually be doing something similar on the Mississippi River with commercial fishermen to help, try to remove some of those or target that species. But the biggest problem with that is that all of the markets for those species are overseas for the most part. There are some, markets in the States, but not very many. So the cost to ship those is so expensive. A commercial fisherman can go out and get $4 a pound for a catfish, but only 25 cents a pound for silver carp. So it's very hard for them to actually go out and target these and actually make some money on it. So, and that's because shipping cost is so expensive, because most of them are being shipped back to Asia in markets there. So people who can come up with ingenious ideas on how to use these fish in the States, they've tried fertilizer and animal feed, and it just hasn't taken off. I think the opportunity is there, and that's what I would like to see, is that if we're going to do this, we need to have a method that we can go out and target this fish and not, have a lot of bycatch of our native species that actually help remove, at least get more manageable levels of those 4 Asian carp species.
Okay. You were talking about the zooplankton earlier. I've noticed, like, I do a lot of river fishing, and it seems like in the last few years it's getting harder and harder to get shad and stuff out of the river.
Yep.
Due to
And that's an easy one to see. You can go out with a cast net, and even 10 years ago, when I was cast netting for shad in the river for bait, it was actually much easier to find. But it's changed dramatically in the last decade. And again, that's probably direct result of Asian carp numbers. I mean, they can make up to 80% of the biomass in some areas. So, and they feed strictly on zooplankton, and that's what our gizzard shad feed on. So, and they're actually much more effective at it. I mean, they can feed 5 to 40% of their body weight a day on gizzard shad. So, trying and the gizzard shad trying to compete with that's the biggest issue. Now we have had changes to the river and hydrology and these large rain events and things like that. And the gizzard shad, they're adapted for those. They do well on these flood pulses, but the Asian carp are just so much more prolific. I mean, they can spawn multiple times a year. I think I read up to 6 million eggs a year. So you're talking about a species that is much more prolific and is a very effective feeder on gizzard or on zooplankton, so they're directly competing with our gizzard shad. And the other thing is that, a shad will grow to maybe 12 inches if you're lucky in its lifetime, whereas an Asian carp reaches 12 inches in 1 year, 18 in 2 years. So that's the problem, is that there is no natural predator out there other than the giant flatheads and blues that it can even eat that fish, and really they're only available for the first year. Whereas a gizzard shad, that's what's great about a gizzard shad, is that it is a forage fish for all of our predatory fish out there, your white bass, your catfish, your hybrids, all of those, and they don't grow to that large size. It takes them a long time, so they're available to those predators much longer, and that's what we need And so we've actually seen impacts to our white bass populations because the shad's not available for them. Paddlefish have taken a hit because they feed strictly on zooplankton. Big buffalo is another one people don't realize that mainly feed on zooplankton. So you got all those species that are feeding on the same resource, and the Asian carp are much more effective at it. So until we get their numbers at a much more controllable level, manageable level, I don't think we're going to see rebound in some of those native species, unfortunately. And I don't know if there is an answer. I don't think eradication will ever happen. One thing good about invasive species is they tend to boom and then they bust. So I don't know if we're on that uphill trajectory and we're going to see a massive decline, because I mean eventually once numbers get too high, disease or something like that hits, and we'll knock them back. I mean that's basic ecology. So it just depends. It really depends on, you know, where we're at on that curve, and with commercial fishing hopefully, and actually markets here in the States, I think we can flatten that or bring that down to a manageable level. There's just so many places, they're spread out so far, eradication is probably not even going to happen.
That's sad to hear.
Yeah, it is. They are definitely impacted our large river fisheries. And the other thing too, if you see on the news, I mean, I manage Wapatilla Lake too, and we passed a bait restriction rule down below the dam to keep people from cast netting, because people are going down and cast netting below the dam for gizzard shad and going up to the lake to fish for catfish. And a young Asian carp looks very similar to a gizzard shad. So incidental bait bucket introductions happen all the time. So we did that on the Black River below Clearwater and below Wapatilla, because we do have Asian carp established below those dams, and we don't want to see them go up in reservoirs, because like you see in the news, Kentucky and Barkley Lake, they're spending millions of dollars a year to try to eradicate the Asian carp in those lakes. They're putting up electric barriers, bubble barriers, sound barriers. They're having commercial fishermen come in and target those species because they've seen huge impacts to their sport fish fisheries. I mean, crappie, bass, catfish, they all eat on gizzard shad. Yeah. And if you have something that affects the gizzard shad population, guess what? They're going to suffer too. So that's the biggest thing, is that, and that's why the Fish and Wildlife Service says you cannot transport those species alive, because we don't want to see them introduced anywhere. So I ask anglers, and this is something you should push, if you do use live bait, dump it on the ground. Don't ever dump it in the water. That's the biggest thing. If you have live bait left over, dump it on the ground, because you're going to end up introducing. And if you're cast netting for shad, I recommend getting the shad from where you're fishing.
Your location.
Yeah. Wherever you're fishing, like Wapatilla Lake, you can go up in the lake and cast net for gizzard shad and find them. It's not that hard. Don't transport bait from somewhere else.
All right, guys. Heard you, man. Matt, I appreciate your time.
Yep.
You coming up to meet me.
No problem.
Very, very informative.
Well, good deal.
So. All right, guys. That was a great interview with Dave. He gave me some information, some phone numbers, if you guys happen to catch a black carp or come across one. First one is Illinois Department DNR. It's 217-557-0719 or 618-462-0362, or the Illinois University, 618-453-6089. And Dave also informed me that I may be eligible for a monetary reward up to $100 for turning this fish in. Because like he was saying, they're wanting to do some studies on these things. So whatever we can do to keep these things from spreading, let's do it, guys. And like Dave was saying, get your live bait, let's dump it out on the ground and try to keep the spread. All right? Thank you guys for watching. If you guys like what you're seeing, hit that subscribe.